Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. Happy New Year. We're actually midway through January now, and so happy that you have joined us. The series we're going to be talking about is about happiness. Excited to be here today with my co-host, Sam Powell. Sam, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm so excited. I can't believe we wrapped up Atomic Habits and now we're in the new year. And I'm super excited about today and talking about what 2024 has in store for all of us.
Yeah, sounds awesome. For those of you that may be new to listening to our podcast, this is a life and leadership podcast that's built around the lessons that we're learning to live out loud from the books that are on our bookshelves. So last year we had a really great series, and we came up with an idea that we wanted to dive deeply into these great books. And that idea actually came from one of our books, which was Coach Wooden by Pat Williams. And around, I guess, Sam, it was in October or so that we started to think about having a theme for 2024, right?
Yeah. I think it was Scott maybe that brought it forward and said, hey, we should probably think about, have an overarching story here and really think about how to bring that to life. So yeah, you went to your bookshelf, which is full of books, and we talked about 1,000 different things, but what did we land on?
Well, we landed on some really good ones. And so if you're someone who is watching this on video, you'll be able to see this and jot down some notes. But if you're listening on audio, which we also love that we're able to bring this to you now in 2024 in different mediums, we'll make sure that Scott has the book list inside of the show notes. We decided that one of the things that we really wanted to do in the new year was give you an idea of what's on our bookshelf in advance, because we found that some of our listeners last year were either reading the book along with us, some were wanting to read the book after they listened to the series, and some people wanted to read the book before they listened to the series. So in order to be able to meet all those different needs, we're going to give you what we're proposing to be. This is our best guess proposing to be list for the rest of 2024, and it's all based on this theme of pursuing happiness. Prioritizing happiness, it means that you're better equipped to really face the day-to-day, whether it is overcoming obstacles, whether you're working in a career that you've lost passion for, whether maybe you want to bring some dreams back to life that you have put aside. Maybe it's that you are looking for happiness personally or professionally or both. But when these challenges arise, sometimes if we can dig deep into finding happiness, you'll be able to connect more to purpose and meaning in your life. And so we thought that this would be a good segue for us, where we laid the foundation. And Sam, maybe talk a little bit about that, about how did this come to be, maybe the building block based on what we talked about last year, and now this is elevating our purpose for this year.
Yeah, if we think about the books that we explored, we talked about really principles for life. We talked about how to make small changes to really get a practical guide on how to pursue something. And as you and I sat down and thought about a couple of months ago, what do people want to talk about, right? How are people feeling in the world right now? What are the conversations we're having with our friends and our families? And, what does that look like? And we really came around to, we keep hearing this theme from people of, I just want to be happy, right? Like we've come out of post-pandemic world, we've quote unquote gotten back to normal, but I see this a lot. People don't feel normal, or that period of time where we all pandemic were, insulated in our houses, and now that we're coming back out, our perspectives have shifted, our thoughts have shifted, do I want to do this thought process has really changed. And, I end up in a lot of conversations, and you and I talk about this all the time because you end up in the same type of conversations with people of, I don't know, something's missing. I'm not happy. I'm not me. I'm not whatever. And so that's really where we landed as you and I talked and explored and talked about the thousands of options we could have gone with from your bookshelf and mine and things like that. That's what it came down to, is we really thought that, everybody out here listening and you and I really wanted to talk about happiness and how to get back to that. Because we've been on a journey this year ourselves, individually, together, about thinking about what that really means for us and setting that foundation, and and really thinking about what that looks like. And I don't know, I love the idea. I haven't read any of the books that are on our bookshelves this year at all yet, so these are all going to be new to me books. I've heard of them, some of them have been sitting on my bookshelf and I just haven't read them yet, so I'm super excited about this.
I'm super excited as well because these are all books on my shelf that I've read, but now being able to do what Coach Wooden's dad taught him, which is diving deeply into these good books, is really encouraging. And this is about pursuing happiness. So this isn't about a fleeting moment of time where you feel happy and then it goes away. It's about how do you pursue a consistency of happiness. So Sam, why don't we talk a little bit about what the books are that we chose for the year, and maybe then we just we take it forward from there. So we have a really good list of books that we're sharing with you. Now, this could change. This is just our best guess as to how we want to set up 2024 for success. And so the very first book that we will be discussing is The How of Happiness by Sonja Lyubomirsky. So I hope that I said her last name correctly. I learned about this book from taking an online class about happiness, and it's a really good book written by a person with a background in psychology, but in a practical way. And it's a best-selling book. It's gotten lots of great reviews. If you are looking on the video and you're curious about making sure you get the right book, it looks like this. It's yellow with red writing on the book. Really excited about this book because it's learning how to achieve the happiness that you desire, and it walks through some really practical things. So when we do our episode next week, we'll be talking through how we'll set up the next several weeks with that as our first book. And then the second book that I chose is Solve for Happy by Mo Gaudat. And we'll, again, as we get into each book, we'll talk about what these books are about and what they mean to us. The Happiness Project happened to be one that, Sam, you and I both already knew about. And that's actually aligned with, outside of the book as well, a journal, right? Like you found out about it because of a journal.
Yeah, and I'm here for anybody who's watching. The Happiness Project has a one-sentence journal that is a 5-year record. My friend gave it to me after my son passed away, and I thought it was just such a wonderful gift to give somebody a moment to think about being happy and to record that for yourself and to see how that changes over 5 years. It's a great gift. It's a great, I think, thing when you're starting a new year and you're wanting to look at, all right, let's record my happy moment of the day and things like that. But there's a book that goes along with that. So I've got the journal, you have the book. So I'm excited to see what the book is all about as I've been using this journal.
Yeah, and I learned about the book because I was getting daily updates through a newsletter from Gretchen Rubin about happiness and pursuing happiness. And during one of the readings, I guess, she was talking about the book, and she has a couple different books, and I became a fan of it years ago. It's not a new book, but it's timeless principles in it. And then the next book that we'll be talking about is one that is dear to both of us. And it's one that I love because I walked through this book with my kids when they were younger. So both of my kids now are in college, but we walked through this book, Intentional Living by John Maxwell, when my kids were, I think they were at the tail end of elementary school or maybe going into middle school. So again, it's not a brand new book, but it is one of my top, I hate to say top 10 because I have hundreds of books, but I'm going to say it's one of my top 10 favorite books on my bookshelf. And I don't just mean one of my favorite John Maxwell books. It's one of my favorite books. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited about that because it's about making a life that matters and living a life of significance. And John often says that once you've tasted significance in your life, then success will never satisfy. So I'm super excited that the end of our year, once we have kind of let go of resolutions, gone through the spring and the summer and into the fall of looking at how do you really want to look back and look forward with intention. If time permits, we'll see. Because we always had really grandiose ideas that our episodes per chapter would be one, and then we ended up having so many great thoughts that we wanted to continue. So if we have time towards the end of the year, we'll round out our series with a book called Life is Good by Bert Jacobs. So these shirts, right, or cups and different designs where there's a little stick figure and there's always some little saying, and then the logo, Life is Good, right? You know about this, Sam.
Yep. Yeah.
And Bert is one of two brothers that started that company. I actually heard him speak at a conference a couple years ago. Just an incredible speaker, but also person. And so he talked about at that particular conference about how he decided to live a life of happiness and doing something that was maybe unconventional. He and his brother literally lived in a van selling t-shirts, but life was good. And it was what built that brand to where thousands, if not millions of people around the world can recognize that brand. And there's just something about it for me. I'm a huge Life is Good fan. And when I wear the Jacobs shirts or even drink out of a cup or something, I do feel happy. And so we thought that would be a good way for us to round out the end of the year.
Yeah, I like that, right? We've got this how to be happy, how to solve for happy, getting into a happiness project over the summer, then really talking about being intentional in our space, and then getting into a place where life is good. Like, I don't know, it feels like a good year to me. Like, I want to end the year with it being good and life being, in that happy, good, joyful space. That sounds wonderful.
I think so too. And just keeping in mind, this is about a pursuit of happiness, but our intention is just like you learned from Atomic Habits. First, you have to start with the reason that you want something to change. There's no such thing as good or bad. James talked about that, right? We just finished it up last week where we really looked at how do you perceive what the habits are that are good or bad in your life, and then how do you take that and stack upon it. So this is about being able to look at what does happiness mean? How do we view happiness? How do we become happy, or how do we find happiness even in things that are hard in our lives? Because this isn't about, again, a fleeting happiness. This is about a pursuit of a foundation of being a happy person. One of the things I loved, Sam, that you taught us early on in the Atomic Habits series was that you said something like, I may not already be a healthy person, but I want to be a person that is known as a healthy person. So I dressed up, I dressed the part. And that was early on in your journey. Now you've gone almost, I don't know, a whole half of a year of not just dressing the part, but living the part.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose, right? This isn't just about dressing the part and pretending you're something you're not. It's about living out how you can pursue these happiness principles and embed that into your life where you're forming these unconscious habits within your life that will lead to a life of happiness. And I think that probably at the end of the year or even next year, intertwined into this year, we'll talk about the difference between joy and happiness. Maybe they're similar things, but not the same things. But this is really about how to find happiness that probably is in your everyday moments. That's actually one of the things that's a principle in Ikigai, which we talk about a lot last year as well, that there's this theory on a business side that Ikigai is that you're pursuing something elusive that you can never really get. It's about trying to find something that you don't already have. But the people in Japan that have this word that doesn't really have a direct English translation, the reality of that word is about finding meaning in everyday moments. And we think that that probably will be here as well, is that there is always something to be thankful for, and there's always something to be happier for.
Yeah. When you think of the word happiness, I don't know, what comes to mind? Like when you think of happy for you, what does that look like?
Disney World.
I should have known the answer to that. I really should have known the answer to that.
The happiest place on earth. Like that's literally their brand logo. Happiness place. Okay, so when you think about that, why is it the happiest place on earth? Because reality is this. Okay, here's the reality. It's usually really hot here. Sometimes it rains in the middle of the day and then gets even hotter and muggier. The crowds are ridiculous. They let way too many people in the park. The food is exorbitantly overpriced. The rides, once you've ridden them one time or 100 times, they're still the same ride. So, what is it that creates an environment where you're escaping something that's worse? People go to Disney World as an escape from things that maybe aren't happy in their life. And they go there and you hear sounds and you see smiles and laughter and you see the balloons and you smell the smells that smell like fresh baked cookies down Main Street. And you see these parades and the fireworks and the paint colors and the cleanliness and the customer service. There's just something about being in that environment that just creates happiness.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting, right? It's like that connection to something magical, to something that's, like, and you said the word, like like this escape from problems in life and, things like that, right? Like that's part of what John Maxwell teaches, right? Like problems are the reality of leadership. You're a leader because everybody comes to you with the problems, right? And I don't know, having that, it's interesting, like that happiness is that magical sort of fantasy escape from that. I don't know, that's interesting. And so I wonder, it's like, well, how do you pull that magic then, right? If we're talking about sustained happiness, I'll be interested to see what we learn over the year and revisit this conversation a year from now, to see what we learned about making happiness pulled into your everyday life, right? It's not something that you escape to in these magical places, these magical moments. And I can totally relate to that, right? Like I'm a huge reader. I love reading romance novels, and all of them are the same. They're low angst, like Hallmark movies, in a nice little package, right? Hallmark movies are super popular, right? And we just came out of the season of all of the, winter Hallmark movies here. But it's that same kind of thing. It's that happy ending, right? Like it all works out in the end. And maybe that's part of what happiness is all about, is that it's all working out, or you don't know. I don't know. I'll be interested to see how we explore that as the years go on, or as the year goes on. And I don't know. It's interesting.
I think so too. I think that, you could say something makes you happy, but does it make you happy all the time? What is that thing that makes you happy? Like there's something underlying, there's like a root of that thing, right? So you could say, we just finished having the holidays. I love holiday decorations, and so that makes me happy. But I suspect that if there was an occurrence in my life that happened around the holidays that was unhappy, it would make me look at those decorations maybe in a different way. But isn't it up to us to decide that, am I going to let this outside interfering, maybe potentially very bad thing that either happened to or around us interfere with that thing that brought happiness? Or can that thing that brings happiness help assuage the thing that brought unhappiness? We're right now mid-January. Most people set out in January to make resolutions because they want to change something into their new year. And yet we find in research that most people that create a resolution, like to work out in January, they stop going to the gym in February. So this again isn't like the magic pill. This is about, how do you seek happiness? How do you define it? How do you solve for it? How do you pursue it? How do you live every day with intention? And how do you really, I think at the end of it all, look back and realize that life is really good and life is worth living? I often talk about my friend Wendy, and thank you for those of you that are praying people that continue to keep her on your prayer list. She's somebody that has solved for happy. She's enduring, the battle of her life with dealing with cancer. And yet she's probably one of the most peaceful, happy, content people that when you're around her, you just are happy. You're happy to see her. You're happy to know her. You're happy to be in her presence. I want to be known as somebody like Wendy. And am I that person? I don't know, because my quest is to be more like her.
Yeah. 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 Happiness is such an interesting thing. Like it's one of these topics that it's not that I struggle with that. I think I struggle with it in like thinking through it and really understanding it. And I'm hoping that we get through this year. And I feel like more of a tangible thought process for me, right? Because I like the holidays for me, like speaking of, you know, the holidays and things like that, like they're so bittersweet to me. There's the joy of, you know, my son, you know, and the magic of Christmas and all of that stuff. But there's also the deep grief of not having my other son here, you know, at the same time. And so, but I would still say that like I wake up, like I come out of all of it still happy. Like happiness is still very tangible. I feel it. I would describe myself as a very happy person. But I would also describe myself as somebody who works through grief every single day, right? And like the fact that those two things are true and can be true is something that like I just think is magical and beautiful about humans. Like we're able to hold this complexity, you know, in ourselves. And so it's just like I'm so excited to explore these books and really get a deeper level of what happiness is all about and what that looks like because you know, everybody's happy different, right?
Mhm.
Or are we, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know, this exploration I'm just really looking forward to.
Me too. You know, give a quick sneak peek before we go for today. This How of Happiness by Sonja Lyubomirsky, and we're going to learn how to say her last name the
Yeah.
right way. But so the
Mhm.
tagline in her book is that it's a new approach to getting the life you want, which assumes that the approach that you already are on is not the right approach. This is a new approach.
Yeah.
I wonder if it doesn't mean like it's not that it's a different approach. It's new,
Mhm.
meaning maybe you add it to your current approach. But then on the cover, it says this much happiness, up to 40%, is within your power to change. So that means that happiness really is, for the most part, within your control. And we do talk a lot last year and going into this year, and I'm sure beyond, about our ability to look at our thoughts and our thinking patterns. Because the reality is, if you're not happy, that is an outcome of something. You are
Mm.
not a happy person, or you don't have happiness in your life as an outcome, or that's a result. That result came from some sort of an action or inaction in your life. What things were in or outside of your control, maybe. Those things maybe stem from the belief systems that we have. Maybe it was from your cultural upbringing. Maybe it was from the way that who you were around in your younger years or even in your current years. But that all stems originally all the way back into your thinking. So, what are you feeding your mind?
Mhm.
What becomes your beliefs about those thoughts, whether those things you're thinking are from outside influences or things you're thinking yourself? And how are those beliefs turned into actions or inactions that give you the result of happiness? So I'm excited to go through this series with you to reinvestigate my thinking so that when I don't feel happy, my
Mhm.
question should be why
Yeah.
and what to do about it.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, and you know, this is the other thing that you know, I think this is the thing with happiness, like, right, just the general, like, fluffy happiness term that I struggle with is like, I don't think you are meant to be happy all of the time. Like, it's one of the many, many complex emotions that we have. But how do you come back to this sense of contentment, right? Like the one of the quotes on the front of the book is a guide to sustaining your newfound contentment. Like
Mhm.
contentment and happiness to me feel very related, but they don't feel, you know, like for some people that's not true. But I just wonder about, I don't know, I wonder about all of that and getting into that space of real, sustained, content happiness that still allows for all of that space where you get to have the full range of emotions. There's nothing bad about being sad. It just like it is well, you know, what's happening in that space. And yeah, I'm just gonna be very interested in, I don't know, the realness of happiness, I think, right? Like the
Yeah.
raw, rough realness of happy and how that looks. And that's what I'm really hoping by the end of the year we get to all of that.
I hope so too. I will say to the listeners before we go today that there's a science, I suppose you could call it, to the order of these books. So number
Mhm.
one is we are starting with a scientist. This is a psychologist. She has a deep background in science with very reputable
Mhm.
in the industry. And so her research and her data was based on evidence of the science of happiness. Then we go into people that are more like regular people that were pursuing happiness. Then we go to a leadership expert who teaches people how to find intention, meaning, and purpose in work, because most of us all have a job and have a life, but some people say, well, I have to have work-life balance, but you have a life. Work is part of your life. And intentional living is about how to live a well-rounded, beautiful life from a leadership perspective. Mm-hmm. And then we end with somebody who created his entire career for him and his family around living a life that's good. And so he did something he loved, but also was able to find a way to incorporate that into a business. And so there's an intention to the order of these books for next year as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited about that. I can't wait for the journey. I hope everybody else is excited about the journey from talking with us as we kind of get to the point where we're wrapping up here. But, I don't know, Denise, if you're thinking about this year ahead, what's your one hope for this journey?
I think my biggest hope for this journey is that people can find happiness that they're seeking. And it's my hope that more and more people will get engaged in these conversations with us, because this is beyond just you and I transforming our lives. The greatest thing that I took away from 2023 with you was that we set out to read books in a deeper level, not knowing that they would transform our lives. And in front of our eyes, both of our lives became better and more rich and more fulfilling. So I know that will happen again this year too. But my biggest hope then would be for more people to become engaged with us. So if you are enjoying these episodes, please continue to share them with others. But even more than that, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear feedback about the things that you're going through in your own journey. So that would be for me. How about for you, Sam?
Oh, I like that. I would love to definitely get in more. The word I'm thinking of is like communion with people, like really getting into conversations with folks around happiness and really bringing that into the conversation between you and I and, maybe some other folks along the way too. But I would, I agree with that. I really am excited about everything I talked about earlier, right? That deeper exploration of sustained happiness and really having those conversations with people through the year, right? Getting into that level of connection, because I think that is part of happiness, right? That deep connection with others. And I don't know, I'm excited to see how that goes. And I hope it goes in the way that I want it to, right?
Yes, so I think it will. Everything that's supposed to happen will happen. Can you go back to the first slide and then we'll close out for today? Is that, friends, if you're listening and you really want to pursue happiness, and the way to do that is to investigate your mind, your heart, and your soul, which is really around the things that you're dreaming about, that you want to do and grow into in your life, and that really looking for a way to live with meaning and purpose. That is the center of what we coach on and what we share with others. Stay tuned, because this spring we actually will have another live retreat called Your Signature Story. So we haven't released the location yet or the date, but if it's something you're interested in participating in, we'd also encourage you to get in touch with us so that you can hold a spot and we can send you more information as we have it. But Your Signature Story will be coming out this spring. You can reach us at info@schoolofthoughts with an S on the end.net, or you can also reach us through our contact information that Scott will put into the show notes. Thanks for listening along with us. And thank you, Scott, for being such an amazing producer, even though you're not here with us on the microphone or on the cameras. You're such an invaluable part of our team. And soon we'll also have Andy back for a couple of episodes. Excited to have him back as well. So friends, at least for today, on behalf of my friend Sam Powell, my name's Denise Russo. Thanks for joining us for another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.